The Leader of the Opposition.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. I seek leave to move the following motion. That this House, 1, notes that A, on the evening of 23 October 2019, The Guardian reported the Minister for Emissions Reduction had used incorrect figures from the City of Sydney Annual Report 2017-18 in a letter to the Lord Mayor of Sydney. B, on 24 October 2019, the Minister told the House, and I quote, the document was drawn directly from the City of Sydney's website. C, despite the Minister's claim, all the evidence to date is that no such document ever existed on the website. The altered document has only ever been produced by the Minister's office, and the doctored figures have only ever been used by the Minister in his official ministerial correspondence. D, today the New South Wales Police confirmed that it had launched Strike Force Garrett to investigate the matter. E, paragraph 7.1 of the ministerial standards make clear that it is for the Prime Minister to stand aside a minister if that minister becomes the subject of an official investigation of an alleged illegal conduct, and 2, therefore calls on the Prime Minister to do what only he can under the ministerial standards and immediately stand the Minister for Emissions Reduction down.
Is leave granted? The Leader of the House. Leave is not granted. The Leader of the Opposition. The Leader of the Opposition. The Leader of the Opposition has the call.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. I move that so much of standing and orders be suspended as would allow the Leader of the Opposition to move the following motion immediately. That the House, 1, notes that A, on the evening of 23 October 2019, The Guardian reported the Minister for Emissions Reduction had used incorrect figures from the City of Sydney Annual Report 2017-18 in a letter to the Lord Mayor of Sydney. B, on 24 October 2019, the Minister told the House, quote, the document was drawn directly from the City of Sydney's website. C, despite the Minister's claim, all the evidence to date is that no such document ever existed on the website. The altered document has only ever been produced by the Minister's office, and the doctored figures have only ever been used by the Minister in his official ministerial correspondence. D, today the New South Wales Police confirmed that it had launched Strike Force Garrett to investigate the matter. E, paragraph 7.1 of the ministerial standards makes clear that it is for the Prime Minister to stand aside a minister if that minister becomes the subject of an official investigation of alleged illegal conduct, and 2, therefore calls on the Prime Minister to do what only he can under the ministerial standards and immediately stand the Minister for Emissions Reduction down. Mr Speaker, the fact is they don't like scrutiny.
The Leader of the Opposition will resume his seat. The Leader of the House. The Leader of the House has moved that the Leader of the Opposition be no further heard. All those of that opinion. The question is the Leader of the Opposition be no further heard. All those of that opinion say aye. The contrary, no. Division required. No. Division required. Ring the bells for 4 minutes.
Well, there we go. They will divide. The government will win the order of the day unless something extraordinary is happening there. But look, it has been an interesting question time, all about, for Labor at least, Angus Taylor, and they have been given some ammunition today because of this official launch of an investigation by New South Wales Police. We'll go through exactly what we know so far, of course. This is all to do with a letter that was sent by Angus Taylor or his office to Clover Moore to do with travel that was taken by the Sydney City Council. Now, we'll pull up first of all the difference between the figures that we have seen from the Sydney City Council and the figures in a letter that has been sent by Angus Taylor. This dates back to earlier this year, a couple of months ago. And when we look at the comparison between these two, this is the key difference. We've got, as you can see here, on one side the amounts there, $4,206, $1,700. This one here, 14.2 and 1.7, and this ultimately was purported to be 14.2 million and 1.7 million, the amount that was spent on travel by the council. A big amount. Angus Taylor, of course, using this to try to say, spend less on travel. That might do more on climate change than Clover Moore's suggestion of declaring a climate emergency.
Absolutely. Now, the defence that we've heard from his office is that there would be no impetus for them to make these claims because it would get caught out eventually, and that they say they downloaded it from the website in that form. On the website, though, the metadata has been tracked, and it does look like it was never on the website in that form. And so these are the questions that have been put to Angus Taylor consistently, and it's the only question Labor's been asking of the government today.
What we do know is the metadata that's been provided by Sydney City Council. Now, we can't, I suppose, say unequivocally there's no way that was gotten from some form, a draft, a website that was briefly put up. I wouldn't pretend to be an expert on this, but we haven't seen the other side of it. Here's metadata showing this is what we downloaded. As you say, Angus Taylor says someone in his office used this information, used the website to get the information. So it wasn't doctored, and that's the key part of the defence. They're saying it wasn't doctored. Labor's saying prove that. Now, there has been this investigation. New South Wales Police is going to investigate this. And it's a Strikeforce Garrod, in fact, that's going to be... We'll get the second part up, not the letter that we've just had here, but Strikeforce Garrod has been launched. Now, it is important to stress this is an earlier first step of the investigation, and there was pushback straight away from Scott Morrison saying, essentially, well, you know, this is step one. Sure, we'll cooperate, but we're not going to come out. And here we have New South Wales Police Force is in the early stage of investigating information into the reported creation of fraudulent documentation. Important to stress as well, Labor referred this to the police, and as they go on to say here, detectives from the State Crime Command's Financial Crime Squad have launched Strikeforce Garrod to investigate the matter, determine if any criminal offences have been committed. So there has been something launched, but it's early stages.
And whether they had any choice but to launch it still has to be questioned. But these are very serious allegations being put against Angus Taylor and his office. Each of those allegations in that letter says that it would carry jail time of up to 10 years if he was found guilty of those charges. Now, that's obviously well down the track, and that's what the Prime Minister was saying today, that he will only be speaking to New South Wales Police about this. He wasn't referring to anything that was being put to him by the opposition.
A bit blindsided. This dropped moments before question time, and that's why Anthony Albanese was able to roll out these questions and, well, at least catch the team a bit off guard. Here was the second of the questions saying, here are the allegations. Are you going to make Angus Taylor stand aside?
The Ministerial Code makes it the personal responsibility of the Prime Minister to decide whether to stand aside a minister in the exact circumstances that the Minister for Emissions Reduction now finds himself in. Prime Minister, the New South Wales Police have established Strikeforce Garrod into the potential criminal behaviour of a minister sitting on your front bench right now. Prime Minister, why is he still sitting there? When will you stand him aside?
Time has concluded.
The matters that the opposition leader refers to have not been provided to me or be presented to me by the New South Wales Police. I have not been advised of those developments, Mr Speaker, and so I think that deals with the issues that he has raised in relation to the code. But, Mr Speaker, can I say about the Minister for Energy and the Minister for Emissions Reduction, I think I can understand why those opposite have taken such a keen interest in him, Mr Speaker, because he's responsible for policies that we are finally starting to see stabilise electricity prices in this country.
So here's the House dividing, of course. We'll go back to that. Look, we know what happens here, and it's a multi-step process. There's going to be the suspension of standing orders essentially will fail. There'll be a move from the government that the member no longer be heard, and they'll return to question time. We'll see if they do, because these things tend to take another 10 minutes or so, usually question time ending at 3:15. So, look, we'll certainly go back to the House if anything extraordinary happens in that vote. You wouldn't expect it to. The matter at hand, though, and this is one that you understand why Scott Morrison responded that way. You wouldn't expect him, having seen this drop online a few minutes before, and then said, "Oh yeah, he's gone. We'll suspend him." So I think a fair enough response from Scott Morrison. Interesting that he sort of defended Angus Taylor in the back half of that answer as well.
Absolutely, he's backing him in, and anyone can refer anything to the police, but the police were very quick to have that response ready as well when we contacted them, saying that they are investigating, and so it does show that resources are being put towards this, and it is a very serious allegation to put against someone that they have contravened serious breaches, serious sections of the Crimes Act in New South Wales, and so they certainly won't be taking this lightly. Yep, you can see that division in progress now. It doesn't look like anyone is bold enough to cross the floor from the Liberal Party. That would be history in the making.
I wouldn't think so. Now, eventually Scott Morrison sort of fought back and said, well, this might be the new standard. And remember the standard that's been set by Anthony Albanese. If people are expected to stand aside at this early stage of investigation, remember that for your own side.
Ministers must accept this for the PM to decide whether and when a minister should stand aside if that minister becomes subject of an official investigation of alleged illegal or improper conduct. 7.1, Prime Minister. What are you going to do to implement it?
I will be taking advice from the New South Wales Police on any matter that they are currently looking at, and I will form a view, Mr Speaker, based on taking that advice. And I would simply note this: if there are any questions ever being raised in any such investigations by any member sitting on that bench, well, Mr Speaker, he has clearly set a standard.
So the longer it went, the more Scott Morrison sort of fought back with a few comments on of his own, and not surprisingly mentioned Eddie Obeid. Fair enough.
All coming out now.
I mentioned it too.
The older guy Scott mentioned, yeah.
Yeah, and the CFM MEU, and it led to, well, there wasn't a withdrawal in the end.
No, but the question that the withdrawal should be made after a particularly fiery back and forth, let's say.
And that's that thuggery that this Leader of the Opposition wants to protect by not supporting the government's bill to ensure that union thugs are held to account. This is a smokescreen, Mr Speaker, and he's running the protection racket for union thugs.
I'd invite you to ask the Prime Minister to do the right thing and show integrity and withdraw it.
Well, all I can do, all I can do in this circumstance is say to a minister or a Prime Minister if they made an unparliamentary mark to withdraw it. But I didn't. As I said, if I'd heard that, I would have acted straight away. I thought it was a general observation that's covered in practice.
Mark Butler is his shadow. What he put to him was there is an FOI that's been denied access to 200 pages worth of information, according to Mark Butler. He says, well, are you going to make this available? Are you going to cooperate with the investigation? Here was the response from Angus Taylor.
This is an outrageous accusation against me by the Labor Party. But to answer the question, Mr Speaker, of course I'll cooperate with any matter of this sort. Now, as I said in my statement, I reject absolutely the suggestion that I or any members of my staff altered the documents in question. And, Mr Speaker, I won't be lectured to by the party of Aldi bags and wine boxes full of cash, Mr Speaker. I'm not going to be lectured to about integrity in the week that Labor is celebrating Eddie Obeid coming out on parole.
We have no more information on the police, sort of at what level, whether they've assessed things at a certain level and decided, because this is what is still up for contest. As I said, we've got on one side metadata that's been presented to the media, and people have delved into it and said it appears to be accurate, that according to what the Sydney City Council is saying, the record of what they have on their website hasn't changed in the past year, so it couldn't have said in August of this year these different figures. But that doesn't mean there wasn't some form of Sydney City Council website, perhaps somewhere else on the site, I don't know. It
is just a bizarre case, because from his perspective, if you thought you could get a win over on them and lie about it, you know you're going to get caught out. You know the City Council isn't going to sit there and think, oh, actually, that's a round-up of about $1 million, but whatever. Like,
well, millions and millions of dollars, far beyond their budget.
So it's just a very short-sighted thing.
Right, so how could it ever make sense to do that? Why would a minister's office do that? To have a bit of a, page 3 whack at Clover Moore. You're right, it doesn't seem to check out. And as we're stressing, because the whole story can always be a surprising one. I don't know whether there's a website somewhere, a form of it, where this version does exist. That's what Angus Taylor is saying, that a staff member accessed the website.
Yeah.
So we don't know what the police are saying, but by launching a strike force, Anthony Albanese's point is, well, it's not sort of at the initial stage and getting struck out and not bothering. They are investigating, and that's the key question, whether or not there was a doctoring of documents, first of all, and second of all, who did it.
What's very interesting here too is just the question time strategy. This is a very directed move from Labor. They were very organised. They had the drops ready to go just before. They had the strategy. Every question's been on this topic. In the last few weeks, they have been accused of being a bit scattergun in their approach while they were dealing with the fallout of the election. This is something to show the government that they do have to be concerned about Labor. They are regrouping and they do have a bit of ammunition to fire at them. This has been a very fiery question time and pretty serious allegations.
You can see them taking some numbers there, Rowan Ramsey and Damien Drum.
See, they do have iPads now. That's a bit of an improvement.
I suppose so. Yeah, I wonder what they're on there. When they tick each person off, so you wouldn't want to double count, presumably.
I shouldn't say iPad too. It could be another tablet.
Yeah, don't. Well, you know, although the tenders for these things, they usually get the most expensive things, don't they? Look, let's go and listen briefly into the House, see if there's anything happening in terms of any action. Look, just good to breathe in the ambience of the House for those people that maybe never made it to an excursion here in Canberra back in the day. We do also have a quote from a spokesperson from the Lord Mayor. The office of the Lord Mayor has been, this is Clover Moore of course, contacted by New South Wales Police regarding its investigation into the alleged make and use of forged documents by the Office of the Minister for Energy and Emissions Reduction, Angus Taylor. We will of course fully cooperate with the police investigation and have nothing further to add at this time. So no big surprise there from Clover Moore, simply saying they will cooperate, and I suppose we'll see where it goes from there. From Scott Morrison, from what we know so far, and look, the new element today is simply that a strike force has been formed. There's nothing beyond that in terms of a decision, a likelihood of whatever might have happened. So on that basis, and from what Scott Morrison said so far, it's hard to see him for now, unless further information comes out, standing down Angus Taylor, standing him aside while this goes on. Let's have a listen in.
73, the questions therefore resolved in the negative.
All right, so they'll shuffle back over to their correct sides. Now, with the vote decided as expected, so we're not going to hear any more from Labor on this particular point